All right, welcome to the On Purpose podcast. This is episode 2 of the Kingdom Behavior Indicators. And this distinction, the essence of this is it's already been permeating. We've already been talking about it, and it is willingness.
Mm.
And first, I want to start off with what is willingness to you, Kirk? And I want to dive into the distinction of my will versus thy will later on. So I just wanted to bring that in for now. But what is
Nice.
what is willingness to you?
What's coming through real strong is like courage and flexibility, or courage and humility. Because the willingness is to step into something uncomfortable, step into something you don't fully understand, step into something that doesn't feel good, step into something that looks a little crazy or a little dangerous. And I'm not talking about stepping irresponsibly. I'm not talking about stepping in front of a Mack truck or something. I'm talking about, you know, trying on something that's feels very uncomfortable, on the inside. A new perspective, a new idea, a new way to be in the world, a new practice, a new, set of rules or whatever, So, and whenever we move from one level to the next, um, everything's different. And it takes it takes a willingness to be disoriented, to be clunky, to keep stepping into discomfort. The ego's secret, I don't know, secret. One of the ego's big weapons is comfort, right? So the ego has us convinced that we must be comfortable all the time. And so uncomfortable is bad. Like you'll hear people say, "You can't say that to me. It makes me uncomfortable." And like a sort of a thinking person might say, "Well, I'm uncomfortable most of the time. I don't see how that's such a big deal. Why don't you just like deal with that and listen?" You're uncomfortable. Great. How about the next step is get over yourself? Because what I'm saying is like really critically important, and useful for you. But people will kind of worship their comfort, and by the other side of worshiping your comfort is worshiping your discomfort, organizing your entire life around never having to be uncomfortable. And that's all well and good, I suppose. But if you're never willing to be uncomfortable, you'll never learn, you'll never grow, you'll never wake up, you'll never become anything of any worth because anything worthwhile involves growth. It involves evolution, growing. The caterpillar goes into the cocoon and turns into mush and then comes out a butterfly. Well, those would be uncomfortable transitions for a human being. And yet that is what it is. That's an analogy that we use a lot, caterpillar and cocoon and butterfly. People are running around trying to be caterpillars, so they staple wings onto their caterpillar bodies. But you might can fly a little bit, but it's never full on it's never full on being alive, full on power, full on being awake, full on embracing, developing, embracing, and leading into your highest self. It's like a compromise. Well, I'll do the best I can as long as I don't have to be uncomfortable, as long as I don't have to hear the truth, as long as I don't have to hear somebody telling me what I really need to hear to stop, you know, following lies or illusions or working against my best interest or whatever, and see that that's what's going on and start looking in another direction towards something. So this idea of willingness, you can be infinitely smart, but if you're not willing to do anything, it's useless. You can be super wise, but if you're not willing to apply that or share that with anybody, it doesn't have any real value. So this willingness is like it's like where the rubber meets the road. It's like you have a great idea, and then you step forward, and then oh, this is going to be more difficult than I thought. Oh, here's a added circumstance. Oh, here's an added obstacle, and most people turn around. If you'll notice, most people don't accomplish very much, um, because when people try something new, it's clunky. And the ego hates being seen as clunky or ineffective or weak or anything embarrassing or anything like that, right? Anything people can use to shame and embarrass, the ego wants no part of it. So people avoid trying something new to avoid the clunkiness or the discomfort, or they get a little bit into it and they run into something that then makes it feel clunky or difficult, or like it's somehow something's going to come back on you, like embarrassment or shame or some kind of failure. So most people don't accomplish very much because they're unwilling to press through. They're unwilling, there it is, unwilling to press through the discomfort and the clunkiness. And, the concern is, oh, well, people will judge me. Well, yeah, yeah, everybody's judging everybody all the time. Like it's now almost never not happening. So yeah, so willingness to pierce through, be uncomfortable, be clunky, be embarrassed, let people talk shit about you. None of that matters. And so willingness is like this doorway. Oh, yeah, willingness is the doorway into what's next. Boom! I dropped the mic right there.
I'm right now currently thinking, because there's a lot of things that are coming through and I want to,
Yes, that's good.
okay, hang on, just chill out for a second. Just pick one thing first. um how do you, so yeah, let's go into that actually, is how do you discern the difference between my will and thy will?
This is relatively new for me, so by necessity, I'll speak from that perspective. Um, but I'm gonna go a step before that. And another part of my life, about 25 years or 30 years ago, something like that, I was part of a leadership organization, and we had this commitment, like we're all working towards this commitment that it's possible to have a world that actually works for everyone, right? So it's really beautiful. No, I was really inspired by that commitment. And one thing that was new for me is before that moment in my life, basically, everything I'd ever done had been for me. My reputation, my safety, my pleasure, comfort, preference, whatever. I chose careers out of survival. I chose partners out of, filling a black void in me. I chose, just, you know, whatever. Everything was about me. It's like I was in a movie and I was the star and the director and the producer, and all the characters, all the people in my life were just characters supporting the main character, which was me. Right. That's so the darkness that I came out of as a young adult. And then when I got inspiredly presented with this idea of like all working together and for a world that works for everyone, it was like massively inspiring to me. I loved it. So that was really my first. It wasn't, you know, thine will be done, but it was no longer my will. I was still, well, actually, no, I was incredibly surrendered to the leadership and the coaching and that kind of stuff. As I got mature inside of that environment, I began to sort of decide for myself what fulfilled that intention. So there's me in there a little bit, but it still wasn't about me getting something for me. It was about me sorting out how to produce the best, forward results, right? So that was a very powerful paradigm, and that really set me apart from just about everybody I'd ever known, because just about everybody I've ever known has been definitely in life for themselves, like just no question about it. Especially people closest to me. And and so that was like a massive breakthrough, and I became an entirely different human being, massively expanded. And I got to work on developing myself to be a resource, and that a world work for everyone really kind of stuck with me, just sort of intuitively, unconsciously, like just like, yeah, what a beautiful thing to work towards, right? And then as I meet John and start getting engaged in Earthwaking University, I'm not really have that much attention on God yet. John's talking about it and all the stuff, and it's very inspiring, but it didn't really light me up. And I believed him, but anyway, so I was just, and I'm just kind of coming out as moving, so I believe him. And I take the position internally that, okay, cool. I'm not feeling all the stuff that he's saying, but I believe him because I'm looking at his fruits and results. So I'm going to serve God by serving John. and I'm going to serve God by having John's intentions come into reality. And so I full guns, have been deeply committed to that ever since until very recently. And I'm beginning to embrace my own personal relationship with God. But again, it's not something, it's like I'm at the beginning of that. So, one more thing. And so, the register that I use to sort out which way I'm going, if I'm going to the darkness or the light, if I'm trying to do something for me or somebody else, is I can feel the attachment when it's for me, like the I want that piece of candy kind of feeling.
Okay.
And when it's not for me, I don't have that. I don't know if that's the perfect. I don't know if that's the perfect register for that or not, but that's currently where I'm at.
Yeah. I was going to ask that question because a lot of people, when they've decided, they've still got, the domestication and the worldly stuff, and they've been doing that and training themselves for so long that, yeah, I'm finally doing this new thing, but sometimes that creeps in, and sometimes we can't even recognize it for
Yeah,
ourselves. And
totally,
awareness is half the battle.
totally.
But what I heard that was really profound in your share was that it was something that you surrendered into. And
Yeah.
so my question is can it be taught, or is it something that has to be surrendered into?
Well, I was surrounded by education moving in this direction
Mm,
with the previous organization and with John, right? So, like, I'm listening and I'm taking it in and I'm getting lessons and I'm getting gold. So, um, that was definitely a component of it. Hearing the stories and hearing Bible quotes and all the stuff. So that was definitely part of it. But there's the part inside me that if it wasn't there, that would have made no difference.
mm,
So the education I believe is important, but it's not the thing. And
yeah.
I don't know if it's just grace. Like, so here's a perfect example, right? Here's a perfect example, right? Am I speaking from my mind or am I letting God speak through me, right? So because um wow, that's weird. I just lost my place. Can you come bring me back to the present?
Yeah, it's about being surrendered into it. And then you had a perfect example about how, because you cultivated it over time, people were talking to you about
Yeah.
the Bible quotes and all the
But
things.
you just asked me a final question.
Yeah, it was about being surrendered into it. Can it be taught or cultivated over
Yeah.
time, or can it, or is it
Yeah.
something that has to be surrendered into?
Hmm, interesting. Oh, yeah. So in the past, my answer would have been there's something that I became aware of and I started making different choices, like a breakthrough, a new perspective, that kind of stuff. And then I started making choices and I built this thing inside of me that's able to produce what it's able to produce. Right. So that's definitely the paradigm that I came from. Right.
Mm,
Now, in this paradigm of all good things come through God, I then relook at that question and look at my old answer. Like, okay, I think there's something in there, but you know, the other answer is I was just chosen and qualified because I said yes.
mm.
So then the question is, well, who said yes? Did God say yes, or did I make that decision? Where do I take responsibility? Not credit or blame, but just like where do I engage in the process? So that's still unclear for me.
Mm.
You know, uh, and then if I was chosen and then qualified, why me? Because I would say yes, or because I did say yes, and then by what grace or internal navigation did I say yes and not no, and all that.
Oh yeah.
So it's not really clear for me. It's not that important to me. I don't feel the need to sort it out. Like I don't have that dysfunction. Like I understand everything. Like I'm clear. There's a lot of stuff I would understand, and have made peace with that. And as long as I have the experience of serving at an extraordinary high level and have, experience of congruency, I don't really have a lot of other questions. I don't need to know a lot of things. You know, I just want to know what I need to know to do my job. Basically, I'm happy to be on what is it, top secret information, a need to know basis. Yeah, I'm happy to be on a need to know basis.
Mm.
Yeah.
There's a space like of, like this, like almost like a false willingness. And it's like this blind obedience, uh, like, oh, to make you happy. Like I'll do whatever it is to just make you happy. And so I know that there's always like the opposite of what it is, that we're talking about. So to bring awareness to that, um, what would you say, around that, like the resistance and the blind obedience without actually having the covenant or the devotion to the bigger thing that you're talking about? Like you're talking about your covenant that you have, that you've made, and you're like, I'm fully willing and surrendered into that, and so, but there's like the counterfeit version of that, which I'm speaking to in the moment,
Yeah.
is like, yeah, so with that
Yeah.
world that's being distinguished.
Um, well, this transformation for evil. How do we say the other one? Spirituality for ego.
Mhm.
Transformation for ego and spirituality for ego. Far more common than actual transformation or actual spirituality. The counterfeit is far more common than the authentic.
Yeah.
So that's my opinion, right? And I attribute that to the ego. The ego is always looking for strategies to hide behind, right? To be safe. And one of the strategies some egos do is being a good person and looking really good and looking noble. Because, most people don't attack really good, noble people who are doing really good things, who are talking about God and Jesus, right? And so that's a safety strategy. If the ego is running the show, then that's a safety strategy, right? Using religion, using the name of God, using the name of Jesus, so that the ego can continue to operate as usual. And so that's really common, right? And it's not necessarily a conscious phenomenon because it's the ego we're talking about, right? So some people know they're full of it and they're just, lying and cheating and, working through getting through the rules and, whatever, lie, cheat, and steal. And some people are just unconsciously, they actually think that they're following God and they're following their mind. And most churches, I would venture to say, are churches and religious institutions of every ilk, religious organizations, I guess is what I'm saying. Um, um, from experience and speculation, right? So I haven't gone to tens of thousands of places of worship, so my experience is limited in that respect. But I've met a lot of religious people from all different religions, thousands. And most people, most of the time, are in their egos. Most people, most of the time, are just kind of sleepwalking through life. They're doing the same thing today they did yesterday because they didn't die last night. And that's about it. You know, and some of those people wave the flag of religion, and for them, there's no difference between waving the religious flag or waving the nice guy flag. It's just a strategy to keep the wolves at bay so that the ego can operate in a safe space and like that. So that's what I see there. So it's not even something to condemn. It's mostly ignorance. It's maybe not even ignorance. Ignorance, ignorance, not like a shaming word, but just like lack of awareness, right? But ignorance and sleepfulness. People are still asleep. People are sleepwalking through life. Most people are sleepwalking through life, buried in the illusions and the domestication and the cult that culture is everywhere. People are freaked out about cults, and yeah, I get it, but everybody's living in a cult. Everybody's living in an environment where reality is not embraced, and the believe this or else is, right? Certainly where I grew up in the States, it's like that. And I
Oh
believe the
yeah.
States is probably one of the most free countries in the world. And it was very domesticating. It was very like, you know, there are certain acceptable ways to be and all the stuff, right? So um, it's very difficult to wake up. Very difficult to wake up.
Yeah, and I also recognized and the willingness is also like, well, I'm willing to do this if you are willing to do this for me.
Right. Which is actually not willingness.
Yeah, which is not willingness.
That's that's negotiating. Or that, on the high side, that's called negotiating. On the low side, that's called whoring. Most people here would probably prefer the word negotiating, so we'll just go with
Yeah, so
that.
don't whore yourself out. Um, so how does someone be able to keep the posture of willingness when things seem unfair or
Yeah.
uncertain?
Well, this is going to sound like flip, but as I look at it, I can't think of another answer. Things are unfair and things are unsafe. That's not a seeming. There's no fairness in the world.
Yeah,
The only safety is God. There's no safety here. Anything could happen at any moment. That's actually true.
yeah.
Yeah. Waking up is
Yeah, so
hard.
it's
Waking up is hard. Man. Like imagine having to wake up in the middle of the night and no one's waking you up and there's no alarm clock. That's what we're dealing with.
yeah,
You got to get up in the middle of the night. There's no alarm clock and there's no one around you.
yeah,
What shot do we have? Like that's why I think this place and this movement is so important. Is we're the alarm clock. We're the neighbor going, yo, the house is burning. Wake up. Or the sun is shining. Wake up. Whatever the message is. And
yeah.
not everybody does.
Yeah, and I've always seemed to find that willingness has like an attribute of like readiness and not
Yeah.
just readiness but with joy. Like there's joy inside of that. I'm not necessarily saying happy, but like I don't really want to do this, but I'm in my heart from where it's coming from. I'm glad to do it for you. Yes, I will. Like that kind of thing.
We may have to create a subcategory of willingness because many of the things I've been willing to do were not connected with joy. Like I
Yeah.
made my promise. I said I would do the thing. Oh, take that hill. Oh, that hill? Yeah,
That
take that
one.
hill. Okay. I said I would take any hill you pointed to. Let's do it. Like that. Now
Yeah.
maybe that's dysfunctional also. I don't
Maybe that's where I want to head. I want to have joy
know.
inside of all of those. Maybe
I
that's
want to be
what,
I want to be joyfully willing to for anything. Yeah, and yeah, sure. Maybe
because
that's
I mean,
what
oh man, because I've been looking in I'm reading stories in the Bible, and I'm like, man, I look at myself sometimes, and I'm like, what a pussy, because Paul, because I'm like Paul went on top of a mountain, he's preaching the gospel and gets stoned like with an inch of his life. And
yeah,
then he's like, yeah, sure, God, I'll go back the next day to the same freaking mount and preach the gospel again. Like I get that type of
yeah,
willingness, that type of readiness. I'm like, that's not even in the world today. Like that's so unworldly.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
that that actually looks crazy.
yeah,
And from
but
our
he's
from our from our Babylonic eyes.
yeah. I mean, we have certain words that are being shot at us, and we're like, no, back off. And so, and it feels like that. I'm not. I have compassion for that as well because we can feel it energetically. You know, but wow, like it rocks my world to recognize some of those things that they went through,
Yeah,
and to be so willing and so ready for Christ like that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
to not even have the resistance to it, like
yeah.
fully. releasing to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we get from the I'll just go along with it to send me? Like
I've dedicated my life to being the answer to that question. That's how I see the visionary program, and this whole mission is how to give people an opportunity to wake up, how to give people an opportunity to grow up. Because we're so wounded most of the time that the growing up didn't even happen. And then, once you've grown up, then there's like waking up, like to a higher, once you're an actually whole, complete, functional human being, then there's like, well, what's next? What's next? So I don't have a pithy answer for that. You know, um, love, truth, God, and probably a lot of work, and probably some time,
yeah.
and a lot of faith. Probably yes. I think that was the one. Yeah, a lot of faith.
Yeah. Hmm. You had spoken earlier about willingness being the door, you know,
Yes.
the door to what? The door to miracles, the door to
That reminds me of the. I hope I haven't told the story on this podcast, so I'll pick up the tab if I did. But there's a prisoner in a war camp, and he's about to be executed. And the commander of the prison, military prison, goes to the prisoner and "Hey, I have an opportunity for you." And the prisoner's like, "Okay, this is opportunity is you can, obviously you're planning to be executed today, so we can go along with that, or you can walk right out that door." And a prisoner is clearly, obviously suspicious, right? Well, what's on the other side of that door? And the commander says, "Unknown horrors." And the prisoner thinks about it for a minute. It's like, dude, I've been through so much. I've made peace with my fate, and I just don't think I can. I don't think I can stand up again. I don't think I can do it all again. He goes, "Well, we'll just do the execution then." And so it was. And then the commander's assistant walks up to him at some point and goes, "Hey, what was on the other side of that door?" To which the commander replies, "Freedom." Life's not fair. There's crazy people everywhere, selfish, blind, oblivious, packed and stacked with pain and abuse, neglect, running around, bunch of kids in adult bodies. And then people started getting really smart and really powerful and building all kind of crazy toys that impact the planet. What could possibly go wrong? I forgot the question I was answering, but that was a delightful story. Thank you for that opportunity.
You're welcome. It was willingness as
How
a
close did I
door.
get to how close did I get to the question?
Well, oh man, it you literally answered the question of earlier as well, actually, about is willingness something that you can cultivate, or or is it
Mhm.
surrendered into? But
Yeah.
what was the little piece that's right in there is it's a decision.
Mhm.
And uh because of the conversation that you're talking about with the story with the prisoner,
Yeah.
it's he had a decision to make,
Yeah.
but willingness is the door, but you
Oh,
have
snap.
the the decision.
Obviously, I thought through the whole thing and it's been just setting up the whole thing for this one, obviously.
Yeah. Oh man.
Good
That
stuff.
even brings up like unwillingness as a disguise,
Oh, or
like
a lie,
yeah,
or a crutch. It's kind of like
yeah,
confusion, you know? People don't like what's going on. They flip a switch, and all of a sudden they're confused, which is just obviously, well, I know it's obvious, but it's a way of being. There's no actual thing. I mean, you may know something, you may not know something, you may be certain, you may be uncertain, but confusion is a way of being that people turn on to, oh, shucks, I wish I could participate, I wish I could listen, but wait for it, confused. Like a magic shield against all discomfort or all responsibility. No, I would be responsible, but I was
yeah.
confused.
What's even greater too, I'm recognizing this is that because I've been noticing that I've been doing this and it
Yeah.
was subtle, but it started to happen was that I was so afraid of losing myself, like losing my mind, losing the like control and the craziness and all this stuff that I've been setting myself up in a prison, in a box to stay inside
Yes.
of.
Very
And
good.
it's just like the prisoner. It's like I'd rather die inside of this prison cell than not know what the heck is on the other side. And that's what we've been creating for ourselves the whole time. And it's an
Beautiful.
illusion. That fear is an illusion. And it's so crazy that we trade in our freedom for that cage.
Beautiful.
And
Well
wow,
heard. That's awesome.
wow.
Yeah.
I'm going through so many like mind-blowing like breakthroughs recently that I'm just,
Yeah.
yeah, just thank God. Um, another question is, how has willingness impacted you as a leader? Like when you witness people going through that or and finally are willing to go through the process, how has that impacted you as a leader watching that and your own willingness?
Well, my own willingness was first. I mean, on the high side, it's willingness. On the low side, it's hard-headedness, you know? Um, and it's been a gift and a curse for me. The hard-headedness has been a curse when I've been involved with projects that were clearly not working, and I stuck with it for another year or two, to my detriment or something like that, so that's hard-headed. And then willingness is, looking at a mountain that looks unclimbable and said, okay, let's go. Come on. Um, so some form of that has kind of always been inside of me. The hard-headed, first was whatever, hard-headed, I guess, probably, or whatever, but okay, so I'm seeing something. So the willingness expressed, like actually like tackling uncomfortable things, came the desire to do that, the decision to be that person came from inspiration. I was inspired about something really big that I saw that I wanted to be a part of, that I wanted to become, that I wanted to, and this was again the leadership thing, the world that works for everyone. Like I was in, man. Like I was really in. I was like hugely inspired. And inside that inspiration, I was willing to surrender my personal comfort and just, you know, 20 or so hours a week for over 20 years. It's a pretty big commitment. In addition to, like every, work and life and love and all that kind of stuff. So it not like soft, sweet 20 hours, like work, like, getting after it kind of thing. And that's like a half a work week, for a couple of decades. And I never knew myself to be that person. Like that's not who I was, right? The moment before that decision and the moment after that decision embarked on a journey. So it's that in that respect, willingness has served me incredibly well because over the years, like I've had lots of different peer groups, lots of different, classes, lots of okay, we're all starting this together kind of thing. And out of all those people, like, a lot of leaders over a lot of years. There's only two of them that I know that are still leading, and yeah, I'll just leave it there. Yeah. Um, and so that willingness to keep going, I wouldn't be here without it, because there was lots of opportunities where I wanted to quit and stop through exhaustion or through some transgression, like fuck y'all, I'm out kind of thing. Um, Many occasions there was the I might be done with this. But and there were times where I set it down for months at a time, but that thing inside of me that wants to get up and keep going has served me incredibly well. And then as I watch other people, um, I this is really good. This is really making me look in places I haven't looked before. So when I see people dealing with willingness, I guess the journey for me, on the low side, towards the beginning of my career, there was probably, I would assume there was frustration, although I can't really remember it. Just like watching people just like not hitting the gas pedal. But sometimes what it looks like, just go, come on, you got this. Go, hit that button right there, fire. And not really understanding as deeply as I do today the nature of human beings. Some of us are so abused and packed and stacked, and it's just hard to see straight. It's hard to think straight. It's hard to, just do what look do and be what looks like pretty simple, things. We're all toddlers coming in babies' bodies. Toddlers coming in adult bodies. But from a more recent perspective, I think I've never thought it through, but I see a real deep connection between inspiration and willingness. And I've been uber focused on inspiration in my leading for a minute now. And it's possible those two are connected.
Yeah.
Although not, I didn't like make the connection in my head, but I notice that I do know that willingness is like you can't win without it. And have been, I do see inspiration as like my number one asset in my leading and coaching.
Yeah.
Inspiration, truth, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Well, it's one, you have shared that as a way of being, as inspiration, it is from your aliveness, from your wholeness, from
Yeah,
who you are from the inside out, and then you're able to even hand over your will. So
yeah,
from your aliveness, it does have to start there, and then it's a decision to hand that
yeah,
over. So
yeah, yeah.
wow.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I guess that's why so many people are so uninspiring, is they're like still kind of half dead on the inside, working through the domestication and the pack and stack and all the pain. Like we kill ourselves every time we say no when we want to say yes. Like a little piece of us dies. So there's all this like deadness in us, and through all that deadness, it's hard to have the experience of being fully alive. I guess if there's deadness in you, you're not fully alive. So perhaps impossible until great healing begins.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that it was a part inside of you that it's like a calling, like a
Drive.
like a drive. Yeah. Uh, you think that that's where your will actually even has the decision come in? Like you got to have a yes in your heart, right? Before you even know fully what you're even stepping into. You know what I mean?
Well, I often don't know what I'm stepping into, but I don't use it as an excuse to back out. Oh, this wasn't what I thought. Oh, okay, cool. Got that. Um, yeah, I don't know what the source of willingness is. I don't know what the source of inspiration is. Like maybe it's just being whole and complete. Maybe those are natural states when people are whole and well and healed, you know. Or maybe it's grace, or
Yeah.
maybe it's, I don't know. But that drive, well, maybe the drive is connected to pain and anger. Like I stuttered as a child, and my mother was a sort of a very unwell woman. And my experience of childhood is like never really being listened to or heard. And one thing I know now in my later life, you want to piss somebody off, just don't let them be heard. And about 10 minutes later, you're gonna have things flying across the room and that kind of stuff. So that was my whole childhood. So there's a lot of pack and stack in there. There's a lot of anger and, resent. And I remember in my younger years noticing all that anger in me and making a decision to turn it into fuel. Because I noticed I worked harder than my peers. I was more serious. I was more intense. I was more grown up, way more responsible, you know, and I wasn't taught any of those things like by my family. My family was the opposite of that. But I remember like having that anger and not knowing what to do with it. And then I would turn it into hard work. And some of the things I did in my early career were really hard work. And I was like known as being energetic and in the front line, leading the charge, that kind of thing. I was that guy. And a lot of the fuel, I think, was anger, which is a low quality fuel. I mean, that was what I had at the time, and it got me here. So it's perfect and beautiful, and I'm super grateful. But that's not a recipe for thriving in life.
Yeah, that sounded like the things that come up with the counterfeit version of willingness. There's like a part that plays inside of it, and it's like,
Yeah,
I'm going to do this, even if it's at my own detriment. You
yeah,
know, and yeah, there's like I feel it alive inside of me sometimes. I'm like, hey, like I thought we are being taught not to tolerate certain things, and no,
yes.
no
Okay.
to this, and yes to this, and well, what about unconditional? And it's like, well, isn't there boundaries? Isn't there like, so just it's been this like uh it's like warfare almost, like the battle that goes on between the two things that go on. Yeah. So
The good wolf and the bad wolf.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And instead of the surviving, it's the thriving, and how
Yeah.
do we all do that together and for ourselves working as one? So wow, it's all in the willingness, to see it through. There was another part that I wanted to bring in, and it's about the decision making, and it was one of the biggest impacts that I've had. And it was from the decision of when I had come to you about being with Dennis, and you had mentioned to me
What did I
of
say? I wonder.
you had mentioned to me, like, before you dive into this decision,
Uh-huh.
take all the time that you need
Oh,
and
yes. Yes.
finding all the things out before you're going into a huge
Consideration.
decision.
All the
So would you
consideration.
bring that world and
Yes.
yes.
This is the world of choosing. I mean, deciding and choosing are parallel worlds. But anyway, I guess it's equal. Okay, so yeah, actually, it works just as good at deciding. So deciding is cutting off from all other options. It's closing. It's stepping forward and closing the door. And but before one does that, a wise choice, a wise option, I believe, is to consider. And my consideration involves thinking, it involves feeling, it might involve conversation, like actively feeling. like feeling into it, feeling, thinking, perhaps conversations, and then inquiring into it. Like I'm in an inquiry. Like, why do I want to do this? Why is it important? Am I attached to something? Is this dysfunctional? Is this actually in service? What are the consequences going to be? What are other consequences going to be? What are other consequences? You gotta make sure you gotta look at all the, really look and see what, who am I going to step on anybody's toes? Am I going to thwart anybody else's channel if I do this thing? Is like, am I being a bull in a china shop? Am I banging into anybody? Okay, cool. And that consideration process takes exactly as long as it does. Sometimes it's almost real time. Like I can consider and like in a second or so later, I'm fully considered and I'm good to go. Some things have taken weeks or months. When I met John, I was in my consideration phase for weeks. He was something that was extraordinary and unconventional. And I just wasn't sure. I just wasn't sure. And the claims that he was making was really extraordinary. And I consider myself extremely capable to discern a gap between what's somebody saying and what they're being and what they're doing. Like I'm very sensitive to that. And so I just went to all of this stuff for weeks and just sat in the back of the room all fucking cold and hard, which I'm also extraordinarily good at. And just deep scanning them the whole time, man. I'm just looking for that one little slip. I've been hurt before that by people who claim to be great leaders, so I wasn't doing that again. I wasn't gonna be nobody's fool again. And I was filled with inspiration, but I didn't leap. I sat and I sat and I sat and I sat and I sat. And then at some point I was satisfied. No, he's the real deal. And I was in. So I think that's incredibly important because it honors yourself and could keep you out of a whole lot of trouble.
And I think that is such a big key inside of the essence of willingness, because the door to unknown horse
Yes.
comes right after your decision, and so
Yes.
you got to have some willingness to go through all of those things together, and this being the On Purpose podcast, it's got to be in line with your purpose. It's got to be in alignment with where you're headed and the direction that you're headed and the people that it involves. And so thank you for bringing that world in, because that really impacted me and the consideration phase for even Dennis and I. And
Yeah.
after that, there was no more considering. It's like,
Yeah.
and that brings so much freedom inside of that space. So
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that world.
You're welcome.
So there's many resources for you on this journey. And can't really bring the full distinction of what willingness is, but I really appreciate anybody that's watching this deep dive into this while we're discovering it even for ourselves, fully what that means, and walking it in vulnerability. So thank you so much, Kirk, for this conversation. And there's support for you down in the description box below. I know Kirk also mentioned the Visionary Leadership Program. It is where you can find your voice from the inside out, and awareness is half the battle. So it brings awareness to all of those things.
It does.
So thank you so much.